As we approach the halfway mark of Dawn Trail's MSQ, we have begun to fix our sights on the horizon and wonder where exactly we may be going in 8.0. I'm going to stake my claim now that we will be journeying south to Meracydia. I'll explain my reasoning in this video, but first, let's have a brief history lesson to refresh our memories. Far to the south of the three great continents, beyond the equatorial line, lies Meracydia, a land shrouded in mystery, spoken of in whispers and half-remembered tales. In ages past, the dragons Bahamut and Tiamat soared to its distant shores. There they found the native forest folk of Meracydia, who welcomed the dragons with open arms. Surrounded by nature's bounty, they sired their children and called the land their home. For centuries, Meracydia was untouched by humankind, but peace, as ever, is fleeting. As the second astral era waned, the first here settlers arrived, wary and distant, choosing to build their homes far from the dragon's domain. Others soon followed, and as human ambitions swelled, so too did conflict. Petty disputes gave way to war, and blood was spilled upon the soil that had once known only peace. It was Bahamut who intervened, moved by the suffering of mortals and their pleas for his aid. He brought order to chaos, guiding them like a shepherd through the storm, and for a time, harmony returned. But even dragons could not silence the drums of conquest. During the Third Astral Era, the Allagan Empire turned its gaze southward. Their first attempt to seize Meracydia was repelled, man and dragon standing united, unbreakable. But Allag does not accept failure. It returns stronger, crueler. The second invasion brought horrors stitched in flesh and steel, chimeras that razed forests and shattered strongholds. Bahamut himself fell, his mighty form obliterated by their hand. In her grief, Tiamat committed the unthinkable. She summoned a twisted echo of her beloved, a hollow shade of Bahamut, damning herself in the process. The peoples of Meracydia too turned to primal gods of their own making, Sephiroth, Sophia, and Zervan, born of ancient knowledge, whispered to them by the Ascians. But gods summoned in desperation are seldom saviors. Allag returned once more, wielding void-sent legions and forbidden magic. One by one, Meracydia's defenses crumbled. The primals were not merely defeated, they were chained, twisted into weapons of war. Meracydia was broken. A land of harmony now turned to wasteland. Its people scattered, its secrets buried beneath ash and bone. 5,000 years have passed since those days. Some lands remain desolate, others repopulated, but those who dwell there are insular, unwelcoming, so much so that any who dare approach are met with hostility, and so Meracydia remains an enigma. We can begin to unearth some of the continent's mysteries, what exactly might await us when we eventually make our way to those distant shores, and what real-world locations may have served as inspiration for the cultures we shall one day mingle with there. I'll begin by going over all available references, some widely known and some others which folks may not be aware of. A 14-year-old lodestone post from the days of 1.0 provides us with a clue. The Kipple staff, a drop from the Thousand Moors of Totorak, is said to have been created by a powerful conjurer who took the taproot of an ancient rosewood tree burned to the ground by a Levenbolt, and fixed to it a ceremonial sun mask used by the primitive tribes on the distant southern continent of Meracydia. 11 years later, with the release of the Encyclopedia Eorzea II, this description was updated, referring to the mask as having once been in the possession of a worshipper to Sephiroth. A Kipple mask is worn by performers of the Goli, a traditional African dance and masquerade of the Baule people of the Ivory Coast, an indication that Meracydia will, in part, be based upon sub-Saharan Africa. This sub-Saharan influence can also be seen with the hippos, native to Meracydia's southern reaches. We are of course familiar with them from their presence in Favner, which would suggest an ancient network of trade or migration once existed between the two lands. The Ben minion begins to diversify our understanding of Meracydia's culture, touting in its in-game description that long ago, the men of Meracydia built great stone monuments in the image of Ben, a mound of myth whose name means eternity. This object is the top piece of such a structure. The word Ben originates from the creation myth of the Heliopolitan form of ancient Egyptian religion, Ben being the name of the mound of earth which arose from the primordial waters, upon which the created deity Atum then settled. The Ben stone, named after the selfsame mound, was a sacred stone found within the Temple of Ra at Heliopolis. It was the location on which the first rays of sun fell. Other mythologies personified the stone as a god in and of itself. As to how interwoven Egyptian mythology is with Meracydia, we can only hazard a guess for now. But the existence of the Ben stone certainly points to it being a fundamental part of the land's cultural makeup. As to Meracydia's ties with Australia, the most obvious is its position upon Etheirys being an almost one-to-one for Australia's location upon Earth. Whilst we're still yet to see our first kangaroo in the game, we did unlock the wind-up kangaroo minion during 6.1, confirming the marsupials are indeed native inhabitants of Meracydia. We then have the existence of the World Tree, a phenomena which exists in a plethora of mythologies and religions. But it would seem likely that ours is based upon Yggdrasil from Norse mythology, not only for the fact that the dragons in 14 draw heavily from Norse myth, but also because of an easily overlooked description of Sephiroth, in which he is said to command the wellspring of life. It is said that beneath the roots of Yggdrasil were 3 wellsprings which served to nourish it. Perhaps the same can be said of Meracydia's World Tree. To further speculate on the Norse connections, the Lanners who bore the World Tree seeds may be a reference to the hawk and eagle who perch at the top of Yggdrasil, the former being responsible for journeying to faraway lands to acquire knowledge. Now, let's discuss the people who make Meracydia their home. During the Second Astral Era, Hyur made landfall and subsequently claimed dominion over large parts of the continent. The only other familiar race we know for sure was present upon Meracydia around this time are the Makote, who would later migrate northward, but that's not to say they all decided to leave. There is a slim chance that both the Hyur and Makote were eradicated during the war with Alag, but I'd like to believe otherwise. The Centaurs were responsible for summoning Zervan during that same war. Outside of that, we know nothing else about them. We may be able to connect some dots, however. Zervan is believed to command the boundless expanse of eternity. I mentioned earlier how the Ben stone was a mound of myth whose name means eternity. Perhaps the Centaur will serve as vessels for some Egyptian mythology to bleed into Final Fantasy XIV. Another race we know startlingly little about are the tree folk who summoned Sephiroth. With what we know about primal summoning, I would wager these tree folk revered the World Tree, with Sephiroth being a twisted version of their belief made manifest, seeing as he is described as the world's first tree ascended to divinity. Some scholars have attempted to draw similarities between the Boloko, a seedkin found within St. Mosian's Arboretum, with the indigenous tree folk. Their attempts have been unsuccessful thus far, but that may be due to how difficult it would be to venture there to investigate further. Dragons still roam the skies of Meracydia, most recently being drawn into Fandaniel's Telophoroi plot to summon Luna Bahamut. In the wake of the Primal's defeat, Tiamat swore that never again shall the dragons of Meracydia hearken to the lies of Ascians, presumably resuming her custodial duties to her children. The only other race I feel we have both knowledge on and have a high likelihood of still walking the lands of Meracydia are the Voidsent. With no concrete evidence on if they all left Meracydia after the war, but given our other encounters with Voidsent across Eorzea and beyond, I would be very surprised if they don't still maintain some sort of presence upon the continent. The icon Sophia is described as having been summoned by diverse peoples of an ancient Meracydian nation. With nothing else to really go off of, we can only speculate as to who may have comprised that nation. With all of this information at our disposal, can we begin to deduce when and why we might eventually set sail for Meracydia? Well, we do have some leads. The most relevant, I'd say, is Tiamat's whereabouts. She had brooded for over 5,000 years, chained within Azizlar, believing it a just punishment for having called forth the shade of her beloved Bahamut, and with that act delivering unto the Allagans a weapon that would cause the entire world to tremble. She sought atonement alongside us during our foray into Pagalthan to destroy the Luna Bahamut. Upon his defeat, Tiamat declared that she and her kin would remain free for as long as she drew breath. She was last seen aiding Amaric's troops in dispatching another lunar primal in the war against the Telophoroi. Since then, her whereabouts have remained a mystery. Given her desire to atone and her unquenchable love for not only her broodmate, but her children, I can only assume she flew south to reunite with her brood once more. 5,000 years and many calamities later, it is unknown as to what role the dragons play upon the continent in today's day and age. Perhaps the re-emergence of Tiamat, who was no doubt long thought dead, would be cause for celebration. We do have one other relevant thread to follow, that being Riol. At the end of the 6.0 MSQ, he informs us that he intends to travel the world, but was torn between Meracydia or the New World. Given that we never ran into him in our journey across Taral, one can only assume he ventured southward instead. He is still a spy master at heart and has proven himself to be a dependable gatherer of information. His curious nature, coupled with an unknown land, would make him the ideal candidate to be our eyes and ears when we do eventually reunite with him, perhaps acting as our handy tour guide. Now, to throw a wild theory out there as to what might drive us to pay Meracydia a visit: the World Tree. Interdimensional travel to and from the reflections remains a problem. Yes, we do have methods of achieving it, but they're few and far between. Given all we know of Meracydia's World Tree and its apparent similarities to the Norse Yggdrasil, I'd posit that it too may possess the ability to act as a bridge between other realms, in our case, the reflections. The tree isn't naturally occurring, having been planted by Nothica, which was then coaxed into maturity thanks to Althic bending time itself. Later, Lanners bore the tree seeds across the realm, planting the verdant forests that exist upon Aetheris today, such as Gridania's Twelveswood. We have seen how the trees there, specifically the Evershade, can be used as a means to tap into the ethereal sea. The same may be true of the World Tree. Perhaps it has elementals of its own, and maybe their own Pajal. The Bold's imagery of the World Tree shows these draconic figures entwined, merging together into its trunk. No doubt a nod to Bahamut and Tiamat, considering it was there, surrounded by nature's bounty, that they made their home. Many of the other astrologian cards have proven accurate in their depictions of the gods and other locales, which does add credence to the idea that this may in fact be what the World Tree itself looks like. As of right now, we are in possession of the interdimensional key, which eliminates our need to seek out other means of reflection transportation. But what if we were to lose it? Dawntrail is the beginning of a 10-year arc. Losing the key to Calyx and whoever else may remain within preservation would be quite the interesting plot thread to carry us into the next expansion and beyond. I am, as always, curious to hear all of your own thoughts and theories in the comments below. If you have made it to the end, I'd sincerely appreciate any engagement, be it a comment, a like, or if you enjoyed it that much, even a subscription. Thank you for your time, and farewell, Warrior of Light. Until the next one.